Sharir
If
is
he's
going to be.
definitely watching this, then we should cut out that black tag bully part. Please.
Oh, I'm going to make sure it's there. And I'll probably send him. I'll cut out just the black tag and send it to Sharir. Please have
And
a look.
I did say that I didn't mean it in a bad way, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. The minute we start saying with no disrespect, you know exactly where that line is headed.
No, he's
Like
going to
Gabby
call
did it for sure.
and be like, what about Shane Warne? What about Shane Warne?
It is time for another episode of ESPN Cricinfo Dream Team. We just can't get enough of this concept. We bring together a bunch of extremely well-traveled, well-researched minds, and we put together what is our idea of a dream team. And in spite of our best efforts done with all good faith, we end up getting trolled and ridiculed because we will never be able to squeeze in everyone that everyone wants. But it's still that sort of season where we can't help ourselves but to name 11s. I think we'll do better than the ICC if I look at their teams of the decade. But this time we've taken a very special theme. We want to pick on ESPN Cricinfo Dream Team today Bangladesh's greatest white ball team. Now, this should already trigger what is a delicious conversation for the next half hour or so. And how can we discuss Bangladesh cricket without Mohammed Isam, who is I think the most powerful man in Bangladesh cricket. I often call him that. He is Bangladesh's correspondent for ESPN Cricinfo, among other things. Man who has just recently been awarded the Interview of the Year. So Isam, many congratulations, and I hope you're doing very well. What's up?
Thank you, Ronak. Yeah, it's a great honor to get that award.
Isam is going to perhaps help me introduce the rest of our panel, because we've got two very, very illustrious voices from cricket watching Bangladesh, right? I'm going to start with Zul Khan and Islam, who joins us from Amsterdam, someone who is a big shot at Uber these days, but that's not the introduction that's relevant. He has covered cricket. He has worked in cricket for years. He's been a former scribe, and he has covered World Cups as well. Zulkar, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. Thank you so much for that really nice introduction.
Well, I have to match it now with Issa, who's got the look of the four of us. I think that's the kind of look we want. That's the setup that we want, and I'm sure that mic is going to be that's going to reveal a better tone as well. Issa joins us from Toronto. I don't know what time it is. If it's 1 o'clock in Mumbai where I'm recording, I'm guessing Issa is a late riser.
2:30 in the morning, but you know what? Anything for cricket.
That's it, as simple as that. Now, Issa is a celebrated singer and musician, also a cricket tragic like all of us. And between Issa, Zulkar, and Mohammed Isam, we are going to try our best to give you Bangladesh's best white ball team. Now, I'm going to be a nice neutral here, as India tends to be. Just sit back and watch Bangladesh have a go. And we'll interject only if I think that the three fine gentlemen here can't agree on something. Now, before we went to recording, I actually found out the 11s from all three of you. And what I would like to tell you at the very beginning, without revealing too much, is that you actually agree on 7 out of 11 positions, which I think is a pretty decent start. I won't reveal what those 7 are. But even before I get into the team, what I want to ask all of you is whether it's possible to pick a common white ball team. That was the first thought I had. We think T20 is isolated in such a unique format. But for what you know of Bangladesh cricket, and you know it better than anyone, Isam, is it possible to pick one team which is as good for T20 and ODI cricket for Bangladesh?
Absolutely. Bangladesh doesn't really have a T20. I'm sorry that people might get offended by it, but Bangladesh's T20 cricket isn't great. And, they usually pick a one-day team in the T20 team. Like whoever has a decent strike rate in one-day cricket ends up in the T20 team. And ever since there has been a BPL, obviously, for the last 8 seasons, but it hasn't really, produced that kind of, like the fact that IPL brings out a few good, big, new names every year who turn out to be, decent T20 players in international cricket. But BPL hasn't done that. So one-day cricketers are usually T20 cricketers in Bangladesh.
We tend to pick players, Isam, that you think at their prime, like that's how we judge, at their fittest and at their best. So then do we discard extracurricular activities, shall I say? Shall we discard either bad behavior bans, action issues, fixing, suspensions? There are all sorts of things. And you know exactly where I'm going in this, because one of the names that all three of you don't agree on, and at some point we will discuss, will be Muhammad Ashraful. So what should be the parameter according to you?
Now, I'm sure cricket comes first. I'm sure when any selection panel sits, if a player is available, you're going to pick him. I'm sure, say for other teams, there are great cricketers who have had trouble off the field, like, Mohammad Azharuddin, Salim Malik. We can name a lot of these cricketers from the past. And even, you're talking about Ashraful, why not talk about Shakib? Shakib got into trouble so recently. You can't really, you obviously you'll pick that side of a cricketer when you're, say, picking a team which will actually go out and play, and whether they'll have a problem in the dressing room or not, whether that'll create eggshells in the dressing room. But in our case, I think it's slightly easier. We can't really tell them to go out and play. Some of them have retired, or some of them haven't played in a long time. So I think our job is slightly easier in that sense, that we can be a little, have a bit of fantasy going, that we can have the best of Ashraful. What would have happened if the best of Ashraful played a game with the best of the other 4 or 5 cricketers?
That's a nice way to put it. And who are we to stop Shakib? The ICC put him into their teams. I mean, there's no way we're not going to have Shakib Al Hasan in an 11 for Bangladesh. There's a good chance he makes most white ball 11s today. So simple as that. So you have the story. And Shakib's got so much power that when they did send him for some time out of the game just stopped. So that's what we're talking about. Now let's go to the guys that we've got in common. We'll go in batting order for a little while. When we talk about the big three of Bangladesh cricket, we of course speak of Shakib. There is Mushfiqur Rahim, and we will talk about Mashrafi in a little while from now. But we're going to start at the top of the order with Tamim Iqbal, who was your first unanimous choice. Issa, why Tamim?
I think if you look at Bangladesh cricket and white ball cricket over the last 2 decades, or at least the last 13 years has been like who with Tamim. Like that, Tamim has been our only mainstay. He's been the only one who's had slumps of form and been able to turn around in a time that's faster than others. Or he was in an era where at his beginning, even if he went through his slumps, he was showing the kind of attitude that we needed at the top of the order. And what he was also doing was that he was playing in an era where he was afforded probably a little more time in his initial slumps to be able to recover from them to be the player he is today.
Yeah, that's very, really well put. Because if you look at your teams now, that's going to be a discussion point in a few minutes from now, who with Tamim. But if you think of Tamim Iqbal and you ask an Indian fan who's, of course, watched that terrible, wretched 2007 World Cup, horrible World Cup, no one remembers it, except the three of you maybe, it says a lot about our first image of 2007 would be Tamim Iqbal coming down and smashing Zahir Khan, right? And it was, oh my God, Bangladesh can do that to India. We didn't think that was possible, certainly not at an ICC event. So if I have to ask you, Zulkar, what was Tamim Iqbal's impact? And does it still hold, fort for you after all these years? He is a prolific run getter. Maybe some would say, oh, you need more from Tamim, with the amount he's played. But you can't deny what Tamim Iqbal's done for white ball cricket in Bangladesh, can you?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I think Tamim is actually one of only, I would say, 2 or 3 Bangladeshi players who have the ability to, at his best, dominate every other bowling attack in the world. So I think that's, for me, I actually personally believe, and it's a personal belief, that Tamim is probably our most talented batsman ever, actually.
Oh.
So I think I actually hold him in very high regard. And as you mentioned, 2007 was basically, the harbinger of this new Bangladesh, which kind of were not really like cowering or getting over the line in like defeats or trying to like accumulate what we used to call back then respectable defeats. But then you had this new era of players through Tamim, and then of course through Shakib and Mushfiq, whom you also mentioned, really able to take the game to the opposition. And that was only possible because A, they had the talent, but B, also because they had that bravery and that attitude to go out and do that. Like dancing down the wicket to a Zahir Khan in a World Cup is not something you would expect Bangladeshi at that phase in like 2006-07 to be able to do. So I really, really hold him in very high esteem. And I agree. I think Tamim's only challenge has been less his sort of ability, but more his mentality. I think if he has, if he had a bit of a strong mentality, and Isam and I often discuss this, if Tamim had the mentality of, say, a Shakib, I think he would have averaged much more in cricket and stuff. So I think overall, not just white ball to white ball, actually, like cricket.
I remember Akram Khan and his brother Nafis Iqbal. Akram Khan is his uncle, who was a former Bangladesh captain. They always used to say that, no, we are not talented. You haven't seen the little one yet. So he emerged out of that family and just burst out into domestic cricket briefly, and then they took him to the national team. One thing is that the way he developed into so many different roles in the team, in terms of being an anchor. Like you'll see that his one drawback, I think Zulkar and Isa will also agree, is that he has a very ordinary strike rate. I think overall it improves sometimes, but that's absolutely due to the role that he has had to play. And as Isa mentioned, we never really had a great opening partner with Tamim. There has been some good ones, and because of that, Tamim is usually given the role of batting 30 overs right from the start. He cannot really press like he used to throughout the innings, and even in the dressing room, he's the anchor. Like he's the cultural minister, the social, the magnet. Basically, he takes everyone out to lunch and dinner. He tells them where to visit in Wellington, where to go to in Joburg. That sort of guy, and it translates into his role in the team, where he usually guides the batting lineup until Mushfiq comes or Shakib comes. It's very easy to pick Tamim in Bangladesh. In fact, if you're picking an Asian 11, sometimes he will come in terms of the guys like Rohit Sharma and Shikhar Dhawan or any Pakistani opener or Sri Lankan openers. You'll consider Tamim in that lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. Tamim Iqbal, straight pick, first name on the team sheet. Before we get into the common ones, now let's have that delicious conversation which has been teased up by Isa. Tamim with whom? Ooh. Now, I'd like to point out, without revealing names, that Isam and Isa both managed to jot down their opener, whereas Zulu is still a little open-ended here. So maybe I'll let Zulkar come in last here, because he should hear what Isam and Isa have to say about who they partner with Tamim, and then I'll get Zulkar in. So Isam, you can carry on and tell us why you've picked a good friend of mine, Shahryar Nafees.
Shahryar Nafees, I think Ronak, he obviously started well with a century against Australia in Test cricket, but he was sort of an appetizer for what was to come from Tamim. A left-handed opener who could take on decent attacks, and it's to his credit that during that time Bangladesh used to play a lot against Zimbabwe, and he scored heavily against them, and it was important. I mean, now we can make fun of it, like why Zimbabwe, why not West Indies or any other better team, or India or Pakistan? Like Liton Das scored hundreds against other teams. Look, at that time, that's what was in front of Shahryar Nafees. Bangladesh used to play a lot against Zimbabwe, a lot against Kenya, Ireland, Scotland sometimes, and he used to murder those attacks. I mean, he was very easily dominant of those attacks, and he scored runs against Australia, he scored runs against England. It's not as if he hasn't scored against Sri Lanka as well.
Shahryar Nafees is definitely someone that would be a strong contender, and I completely understand why Isam Bhai would go for him, because if you even look at our stats, the fastest to 1,000 runs is Shahryar Nafees, I think, still. And when we had having one century was like a massive thing for a Bangladeshi player, I think Shahryar Nafees raked up 3 or 4 before like anyone else could get close to him. But again, if you talk about Liton Das, the only thing we wouldn't want Liton Das there is because of the lack of longevity. And that's what Shahryar Nafees suffers from my end. But Liton, for me, if I go to the recent stats, the highest score by a Bangladeshi player, the highest score against India by a Bangladeshi player against a very good attack on an Asia Cup final. If I take these into consideration, and his recent performances, even in the local leagues, you see the way he times the ball, you see his technique, and just like Zulkar Bhai said, he feels Tamim is Bangladesh's most talented batsman. I feel like because Liton is so easy on the eye, I feel like he is my contender for Bangladesh's most talented batsman. So that would be my reasoning.
I was listening to the two of you, and while I was tempted to do a little exercise, which is Liton Das. The only argument against him, you think, is the early stage of his international career. He's played 36 ODIs in comparison to the 75 that Shahryar Nafees did. And I just quickly scanned through Shahryar Nafees' first 36 ODIs. And you'll see both of them with 300s. You'll see the numbers with, I think Shahryar has more 50s in his first 36. And there is opposition against Australia, against Sri Lanka, against a better Zimbabwean side, you'd think, than Liton Das would have faced. And therefore, it's interesting that if you cut Shahryar Nafees' career at 36 games, would you think, this guy's awesome. This guy's going to be great. And does that make the conversation more appetizing towards Shahryar than Liton Das? Let's say Liton Das has 100 games and keeps this level of consistency, no doubt. So now let's see with that number and that information, where the Zulkar is closer to a decision, he had Shahryar and Liton Das in his possible probabilities, and he had one more name. You can tell us who that is, Zulkar.
I think having actually listened to everyone, and I think I would also tend to put Liton Das in that cohort. I think I had his name first as well, if you remember on it. I think Shahid Nafees also, like, I really liked him. I think when he came under the 400 points that Isam made whole like relevant completely. I consider him, and actually not to put this in a derogatory way, Bangladesh's biggest flat track bully, basically, right? So if you had a poor opposition, he would dominate them. And I think actually that was a good thing back then, because we didn't have players like that who could fill their boots when you had the chance, right? You didn't really have players like that. And Shahid Nafees was actually very talented. I mean, I actually remember watching him in school cricket. I mean, up front one time, and he could just hit everyone out of the park. He was just like an elite level like talent back in that time, and he translated that fairly well to most oppositions. And he did perform against Australia. He did perform against England in a few other occasions as well. And so he is a strong pick, definitely. But I would say Liton Das and the attitude he brings to the game, as Isa mentioned, the way he times the ball, the fact that he's also Bangladesh's highest individual scorer, a record that he's held in these actually 36 games, despite being pitted against someone like Tamim Iqbal, who's played for far longer. I would actually pick him a shade above Shahid Nafees in this one. So between the two, I would just say Liton Das.
I'll give you one chance to try and respond and defend poor Shahryar when he was called a flat track bully. But I would say Liton Das, if you played the kind of innings Liton Das played in the Asia Cup final a couple of years ago against an Indian side that had Bumrah, that had Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, that had Chahal and Kuldeep and Ravindra Jadeja, I don't think we field those five together anymore. That's probably India's best. You get 100 against them, you get a very strong chance that you're going to be part of these teams. So, Isam, it looks like you're outvoted from Shahryar to Liton Das. Are you happy with that?
I wouldn't think that he would mind missing out on it. I'm sure he'll be watching this and he'll have his own review of it. But I think, Liton Das shades Shahryar Nafees. I think it's fine. I think we can go with Liton.
All right, brilliant. So we have a partner for Tamim. We've answered the question that's in some ways plagued Bangladeshi selectors for a long time. Who with Tamim? We've gone for Liton Das, talented right-hand batsman that he is. Gives you an extra option with the gloves for what it's worth if you ever need your dream team to have some extra skills. Now let's go to the big boys, shall we? And not that Tamim isn't one, but I'm going to use them together because Shakib Al Hasan and Mushfiqur Rahim just changed the face, you'd think, of Bangladesh cricket together. Tamim had his role at the top, then comes Shakib and Mushfiq, and dare I say, Shakib and Mushfiq have done it in the third format as well, arguably the toughest of the lot. So, Shakib Al Hasan, Mushfiq Rahim, absolute no-brainers. Isa, your thoughts when you pick them?
Yeah, Shakib and Tamim definitely. Now, if you're talking about batting order, then for me, number 3 would be where I put Shakib. Because I think, again, average-wise, how he's performed, he's come in, people have spoken about how he shouldn't be elevating himself at number 3 and stuff like that, but he's really come in and he's really answered the critics, and the stats speak for themselves at number 3. How he comes in, how he attacks the situation, or how he stays on the wicket depending on the situation, bringing that experience in, especially in the Bangladesh team where it's been hard to find that other middle order batsmen outside of Mushfiq and Shakib and Mahmudullah. I think him at number 3 has been a revelation for us over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, I think it's not just Shakib gets in. We all know that, Isam. It's about where you bat Shakib, especially in ODI cricket. Did last year's World Cup just settle the debate forever?
I don't know. I mean, even with the West Indies series that's coming up, I don't see Shakib batting at number 3 right away. I think that World Cup placement that he had, he chose it. There was a lot of debate in the team. So a lot of the senior players thought that having Tamim and Shakib right at the top, risks having only Mushfiq, chaperoning the rest of the batting lineup with, guys like Shommo, Sabir, not really scoring regularly at that time, but it paid off. I would still pick Shakib at number 5 in my dream team, Bangladesh white ball team, with Mushfiq on top of him. I think that sort of cushion gives him the license to bat at at a pace in the latter part of the innings, say 30, 35 overs later. He comes in and then you have one set batsman out of Mushfiq or Tamim with Shakib. That makes a lot of difference. I think that's usually been the difference between Bangladesh scoring 280 and 320.
I picked him at 3 in my lineup, given the fact that he averages, I think, close to 60 at 3 from a non-trivial number of games. I think he's played like close to 30 games in that role, which is probably roughly 10% of overall his career, right? And I actually feel Mushfiq is also a player who bats better slightly lower, rather than at 3, because he has the ability also to do an acceleration from a cold start kind of position where he can really use his leverage to hit big sixes, which is something Bangladesh lacks quite a bit. I think Shakib can also hit quite a bit or accelerate, but I think he prefers to be more of an accumulator in the early phase of his innings, and then really plays shots, as Isam said, once he gets the feel of it, basically. So,
and there's a nice idea of having Mushfiqur towards the end. You just think if you're a Bangladesh fan and you want someone batting in a pressure situation towards the end, yes, you'd want Shakib and Mushfiq both, but you wouldn't mind just Mushfiq there as well. It gives you a sense of assurance, doesn't it? Now Mushfiqur Rahim, everyone's picked him. The only one who's given a slight slash, perhaps just an honorable mention to another keeper batsman that would have come close, is Zulkar. So Isam and Issa were absolutely clear. Mushfiqur Rahim, wicketkeeper in my team. But Zulkar had a little word of mention for Rashid. So let's go to you, Zulkar.
Yeah, no, I think again, it actually comes down from having seen him in an era where Bangladesh, as I said, were accumulating essentially respectable defeats. And, you'd often have a situation where we would be like 6 or 7 down for 40 or 50. And then basically we would just be like staring defeat in the face, and we would think, okay, we're going to get booked for under 3 figures in this actually innings. And then actually you would have like him really stabilizing the batting and coming in there. And I think he epitomized in that era the one aspect which I feel many cricketers even in this era don't have, which is grit, right? I think for me, like Khalid Mashood, like more than being actually wicket-keeper batsman, obviously is nowhere in the talent family as Mushfiq is when it comes to actually batting. I mean, like Mushfiq is far and way ahead of him. But I think Khalid Mashood had a lot of grit, and there's always I'm actually personally always fond of having grit in my team, and so I think he's an interesting, I would say, honorable mention in this actually regard. But obviously, I'll still pick Mushfiq well ahead of him.
Yeah, I think if you ask an Indian cricket fan, Isa, who annoys you the most in Bangladesh cricket, they probably put
Mushfiq Rahim
right up there, and I would say that's a compliment, because
that's a huge compliment.
It's like how there are those that say, oh, there are Virat Kohli gets into the face of the opposition. Indian captains have never done that. They've been too polite. They've almost been respectful. And here's a guy who's willing to take on, the power of the other forces of the world. And something about Mushfiqur Rahim tends to do that. Indian fans will go, God, I can't stand Mushfiqur batting, because he just does that to you. He gets in your face, which I guess is a compliment for the batsman.
Totally.
I feel like it doesn't end there, and then you go home and see this tweet from him where he goes like, ha, so he doesn't just leave it on the field. He's just gonna go home and be like, yeah, let's just give them more. He's a very unlikable guy for other teams. I can understand, but like I'm a huge fond of those things. Even like when I played soccer, I was the guy who'd like chirp in someone's ears. I understand that side.
In this Facebook Live that Tamim did during the pandemic, Virat Kohli actually mentioned Mushfiq as the most annoying guy behind the stumps, and he mentioned him a couple of times, saying that don't pretend to be good guys. Mushfiq will say something mean to me shortly, because I know he's about to say something almost all the time.
Yeah, look, according to me, that's just awesome. I mean, there's too much of the other kind, right? Everyone just being tight-lipped and not having a go, and it makes our life very boring, doesn't it? As people who cover cricket, and people like Mushfiqur give us something to do. So I love it, and there's no doubt Mushfiqur's quality. The numbers speak for themselves: 200 plus games, 6,000 plus runs for a keeper batsman, to get 700s and 38 50s. This is among Bangladesh's best. So it's quite simple. Mushfiqur gets there on merit, and he'll add that little chirpy value as well to the opposition. Now, the other unanimous choice, and this will again add to the shape of the batting order, Mahmudullah. All of you picked him, and I'm very happy that you did, but I'm staggered when I went through the numbers as to how he's played just about 20 odd games less than Tamim, Mushfiq, and Shakib, so it's pretty much in the same number of games, but 4,000 runs for Mahmudullah. Large part of perhaps shuffling him up and down the batting order. I thought after that 2015 World Cup, here's a man who's going to bat 3-4 for the rest of his life. And Bangladesh keeps surprising me every time I tune into their cricket a few months later. Mahmudullah is just going lower and lower. I'm very happy he's there. Isam, Mahmudullah makes it into this team, no doubt, right?
Yes, the finisher of the T20 team. So probably the only guy who has that T20 credence coming into this white ball team. He's transformed his T20 career for the last 4 or 5 years. He gets short gigs in the CPL and PSL as well. So that has added to his ODI, attributes. He did play well in the World Cup at number 3, but there was again a specific role which Chandigarh Singh gave him a bit of license to play shots in the first power play and then hold the innings, which Shakib later did in the 2019 World Cup. So essentially, Mahmudullah will bat at number 6 in this lineup, I think, with Mushfiq and Shakib above him and making sure that he's there in the last 10 overs.
Yeah, so for Mahmudullah, we first have to start with the fact that Bangladesh over the last 10 years, we've had a ton of mediocre middle order batsmen who bowl off spin.
Mm.
And there was a huge quantity of that. There's even now, if you look at like our leagues, every upcoming player almost is either an opener or like a middle order batsman who bowls off spin. And out of all of these mediocre ones, I feel like Mohammadullah has been the only one so far that's been able to progress it then to the next level. Not Nasir, not Musaddiq, not Afif so far. There's so many guys. A lot of it was expected out of those guys, but it seems like Mohammadullah has been able to transform himself.
I think he's probably one of the few Bangladeshis who would be very comfortable batting with the tail. He can actually sort of, as Isam mentioned, use his flicks and tricks to nurture the strike and keep it. Plus, he also has that cold start acceleration ability, which very few Bangladeshis have. So, like a really, really valuable contributor to the whole batting order. And at 6, a fulcrum of the team that transitions the middle order to actually the lower order. I think he's a very useful bowler and a very, very good kind of deviation to have when you have generally a team which will likely be chock full of left-arm spinners. So, so I think definitely I would pick him and pick him at 6 for sure.
If we look back at our team now, we've locked in Tamim and Litton at the top. Shakib is the unanimous choice. You can bet him where you want in a dream team, but we're going to go for 3. And you've got Mushfiq and Mahmudullah, you'd think, would bat 5, 6. Now, there will be a very interesting conversation of who fills in on either side of that. But let's put that on hold for a while and break the monotony and just go to the bowlers. Let's have some fun. And we spoke of leadership from Mahmudullah. We've already in this list got 1, 2, 3 guys who've captained Bangladesh before. I think, has Mahmudullah also captained at any point? Help me out.
T20s, yeah, T20s.
T20, yeah.
Right. So you've got 4 guys that have actually captained Bangladesh, and yet I think there'll be absolutely no doubt as to who's going to lead this side. So let's go to Ashraful Mortaza, shall we? The man who carries Bangladesh cricket literally on those knees and shoulders that he's got. Let's start with you, Isa. It was an easy pick, and it's sometimes for a fan of recent memory, it's hard to remember Ashraful Mortaza at his best, which was something. I mean, you look at him now and you look at him back then, it's a different bowler altogether. But Ashraful Mortaza walks into this team and perhaps as captain as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Bangladeshi cricketers, sometimes we don't have that grit that Zul Khan mentions. Sometimes sometimes don't have that cricketing brain to go with that talent. And Mashrafi, time and time again, with his pace being in the low 140s to like mid 120s, he's always shown that he has that cricketing brain, that ability like Isam mentioned with Tamim as well, but even more senior about bringing the team together and make that winning mentality. And for me, more than that, since 2015, going with that pace attack and changing the whole slow left arm spinner, drag the game down kind of cricket to like going for an attacking cricketing mindset has been amazing.
I mean, I think you look at Mashrafi as the spiritual leader of Bangladesh cricket, right? In general, he's the guy who's been really able to carry us on his shoulders or his rickety knees, as you mentioned, right? Over the last, 18, 19 years. And I still remember when Mashrafi, came onto the scene, early in the 2000s. I think he was a tearaway fast bowler, and we were all excited that we had, our kind of, Pakistani fast bowler equivalent who would be able to carry us forward over the next 10 years or so. And unfortunately, Mashrafi never really realized the potential of his fast bowling in that space. But I think he's often reinvented himself as a cricketer who's able to contribute despite having lost his natural gifts to some extent, right? Across. I remember I actually once spoke to Shaki when he mentioned the first time he went to BKSP. He saw this, big strapping guy who was hitting sixes so far that they were just amazed. How were his sixes going so far, right? And that guy was Mashrafi, right? He was a couple years ahead of Shakib, I think, at BKSP, and it was pretty amazing to kind of see that, and even from a player like Shakib, right? And so yeah, I mean, Mashrafi, unanimous choice for me. I think a guy who's reinvented himself time and time again, and a guy who continues today to be an inspiration for many cricketers in Bangladesh. Definitely unique choice.
Look, he grew up in a small town, came to Dhaka very early, and then was fast-tracked into the Bangladesh team. Didn't know about all these biometrics and everything. He learned it on the go, and bowling action was terrible when he started, and now he's probably the most emulated bowling action in the country. Yeah, he really is a bridge between the powers that be and the little guy. And he used to be the little guy. He remembers what it was like to be the little guy. So he has that ability to bring everything together, to bring everyone together. If there's a good idea, if there's a good plan, even from one of the younger players, he would carry it up to the team management and explain that this can work. When he became captain was really a low point in Bangladesh cricket in 2014. Even when he became captain in 2009, I think Ashraful was given the captaincy for 2 years, and it really didn't really go anywhere. He himself suffered severely with bad form. Then Mashrafi took over, got injured, and then it was a long saga of him getting back to fitness, 5-6 years. And then when he took over, 2014, it was another very low moment. I mean, nothing was working in Bangladesh cricket. He, got everyone together. Shakib, Tamim, he made sure that Shakib, Tamim, Mahmudullah, and Mushfiq got their due respect in the team and within the BCB. Yeah. But then he brought in guys like, we're going to mention them. I mean, we already mentioned Liton, Shomu, Sabir. So these cricketers were young. They needed someone to back them. And you have others too, like Mustafiz. You have others like Mehdi and all these cricketers. Mashrafi didn't discover all of them. May have discovered one or two, but whenever a good talent comes in front of him, and if the talent, it doesn't matter to him where he comes from a structured background like BKSP, or whether he comes from league cricket, or whether it just comes from the village and he's trying his best. I've seen him in the nets, how he treats people. That's something that I think all of Bangladeshi, all the Bangladeshi cricketers can learn from.
Yep. All right. Mashrafi Mortaza just gets into this team. You think he's going to be captain of this team as well, and all those names that Isa mentions. The subcontinent doesn't quite put bowlers as captains. Wasim and Waqar perhaps exceptions, but this is a man who's bowled and led Bangladesh cricket with huge success and tremendous honor. So let's put Mashrafi right up. Then we need a fast bowler with him. Now, Mashrafi's played 220 ODIs. The fast bowler that was a unanimous choice between the three of you has not even played a third of those. So what makes Mustafizur Rahman so special that you put him in to your 11s? Isa, let's start with you. Why Fizz?
Because he's now trying to learn how to bring the ball the other way. But yeah, jokes aside, what he's been able to do, even though he's lost some of his sharpness over the last, since his shoulder injury a few years ago, has been phenomenal. And I still find it hard to see how if a fully fit Mustafiz, even today, would be left out of any white ball Bangladesh team, even over all the pace bowling talent that's coming out. So for me, it's something that he bowls that's extremely unique all over the world. Everyone's aware of that. And it seems like he's getting some of that back. And to have that kind of pace bowling talent from Bangladesh coming in and like doing it on the world stage and doing it in the IPL has been great. And it seems like he has a lot to offer to Bangladesh. Like, he's probably, alongside Liton, the only other unanimous pick that is from the current era that is still a very, very young player. Yeah. But I guess like it speaks volumes about the kind of talent and how Bangladeshis rate him as a cricketer.
Yeah, key word there being, let's assume everyone at their peak fitness, right? That's how we're going to pick our dream team. Who's to say that Mustafizur Rahman, still young, won't find his peak again? No, his peak fitness again. But Isam, very few players had the sort of instant impact in international cricket that Mustafizur Rahman did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the one 5-wicket haul and one 6-wicket haul against probably the best batting lineup of the time, and not just, getting wickets, but getting them in some strange, with a strange concoction on the ball, making sure Rohit Sharma doesn't get out of his shell quickly. Ajinkya Rahane and all those big wickets right up at the start. It was very interesting to find out that Mustafiz actually hails from a village which is 11 kilometers from the Indian border. I mean, if it was just, that way slightly, you guys could have boasted about him.
Stop it, stop teasing. Yeah.
And then, just going on and playing so well in the IPL. Obviously, he was the emerging player, I think, in his first season for Hyderabad Sunrisers. There is very few bowlers in the world, even now, I think, who has that one extra delivery. Not extra, a bowler like we're seeing a lot of new bowlers like Bumrah has his has great things about him. But there's that one X factor. I think there are not many Bangladeshi bowlers you can actually say that who has that X factor, and Mustafiz has that.
I mean, that Sunrisers season, very few bad bowlers in the history of the IPL have made Andre Russell look foolish, let alone in the history of T20 cricket. And Mustafiz got him to land on his chest with a peach of a Yorker. This is the guy that I think was special. And therefore, that's just it. Mustafizur Rahman, a special talent that makes this team. You had him with a tick mark in your side, but you did put him ahead of some more experienced bowlers, the likes of Rubil Hussain and Tashkin Ahmed. You've had Mustafizur there.
Particularly for myself, one thing I really always like about Mustafiz is his real lack of media training. I think for me, he brings that endearing quality. And I remember when he first came back from playing in the IPL, and he was probably at that point the biggest star in the country, even ahead of Shakib. This is one of those few times in the last 10 years where someone's probably superseded Shakib in like media actually attention. And there were people waiting at the actual airport to speak to him. And I actually remember he went in the interview and he said, "I actually just want to go home and speak to my mother," right? And it was like it was so endearing to see someone with that level of like cricketer being that way. And I feel like just for that I would pick him in the team.
All right.
So I think
for me gets
yeah.
in his side. It's now time to move to the discussion that Isam did tease. The left-arm spinner. Surely there's going to be a left-arm spinner. There's already Shakib. But will there be one more specialist left-arm spinner? Will there be two more? I mean, Bangladesh produced left-arm spinners for fun. We've got one on the panel. I know Isam,
exactly.
very talented with his left-arm spin. I don't know, one of you as well, roll your arm. Or maybe you can. If you've not tried it, try it. I'm sure you landed perfectly fine. And as I saw your teams, the unanimous choice was Abdul Razak, right? Again, someone who Tendulkar himself has admitted was an annoying bowler to face, a hard bowler to face. And the other one that got 2 out of 3 votes was Mohammed Rafiq, who of course was one of the first impactful left-arm spinners you think of the tough era of Bangladesh cricket. You can guess which of the 3 has not picked him, given I now know the age difference.
Yes, exactly.
So let me go to Zul Khan, who has picked Abdul Razak and who also did pick Mohammed Rafiq. So would they both hit your team as the second and third, or rather that makes 3 left-arm spinners along with Shakib? You'd have both of them, Zulkar?
Yeah. No, I think Bangladesh generally has always performed well when we've had a slightly long batting lineup and a diversified bowling lineup. I think even if you look at left-arm spinners and the 3 of them in the team with Rafiq, with Shakib, and with Abdul Razak, they all 3 bring slightly different elements of left-arm spin into the team, whereas maybe like Razak is probably I would say least celebrated of the 3, but he's probably been one of the most consistent performers, one of the highest wicket takers for Bangladesh over time. And as you mentioned, even eminent personalities like Sachin Tendulkar has rated him quite highly as well. So I think he becomes a very, very, like, he would always be able to bowl a very strong line and length, and he would always be a thorn in the side of teams that were playing we were playing against. And I really rate him quite highly. Definitely, he's actually one of the picks. For me, like Rafiq is again also a little bit of I would say sort of like nostalgia pick, but also someone I actually think brought the right kind of attitude into a team during what we call our dark days or the early days of Bangladesh cricket. When we were really struggling, and I mean, he was one of the players who would always be able to make a difference. He had just that extra bit of quality that he would bring into his bowling. I remember he also once got Sachin Tendulkar like bowled. And it was a big scene at that point of time. I think Tendulkar was on 48 or 49. He was about to hit his 50, and then Rafiq came and actually got him out. So I think the last piece I want to mention about Rafiq, I remember I was a journalist back then, and he had actually performed. I don't remember exactly what game it was, but he performed really well against Australia. And then a journalist pitched a actually question to him saying, you've performed so well against Australia. Like, what does it mean for you and everything, right? And this was actually Ricky Ponting's Australia, if I'm not mistaken, right? And he said, "Oh, Australia, Zimbabwe, it's all the same to me, right?" So he had that, he had that real ability about like not letting the opposition fade him or dissuade him from his performance, and he had the ability to just go out there and play his own game, and that game was always brought a little bit of extra quality, and I actually really, really admire that.
I'll start off with Rafiq. Transformed from a left-arm quick to a left-arm spinner in the 90s, and he was a one-day bowler. As you know, Ronak, we just played one-day cricket till 2000, and then started to play a lot of Test cricket suddenly. Rafiq also had a problem with his bowling action. If Zulkar and Isa remembers, it was just after Bangladesh's inaugural Test match. He missed out on 2 years of Test cricket, and the moment he came back in 2003, he started to take a lot of wickets against South Africa, Australia being one of those teams, and Sri Lanka quite regularly. He was different. He used to bring the ball in all the time. He used to come across the umpire and then have a bit of a jump and bowl. Aminul Islam Bulbul, who used to be Bangladesh captain, he told me that this was absolutely his fast bowling action as well when he was a tier away fast bowler in the 80s. Habibul Bashar also recently told me that every time he was in trouble, it was Rafiq. So basically, Rafiq used to bowl from one end, used to have another bowler from the other end, rotating. So Rafiq comes in quite easily. And that transformation I was talking to you about, the way he became Bangladesh's first bowler to take 100 Test wickets in just 4 or 5 years, that was something else. That was just, another transformation, which, is very underrated because no one really talked about Bangladesh cricket at that time. And obviously Rafiq went under the radar, but Razak is the stock bowler. So when Bangladesh was approaching the 2007 World Cup, Dav Watmore and Habib Bashar thought that we should have Rafiq, who was the main bowler. We should have Razak because he just came back from correcting his action. He had to correct his action twice at that time. He came back and he was that bowler who would take the semi-new or the new ball and, bowl that first 6-7 overs, which were crucial for Bangladesh just after the fast bowlers, got tired. And then you had Saqib. So these three played together for a year and Bangladesh won a lot of matches. I think 24 out of 32 matches they won at that time, which is quite rare. Razak comes in. He's also a bit of a batsman. I mean, towards the end of his career, he has a 30-ball 50 against Zimbabwe in one, from a tight situation. So, he even adds a bit to the, batting lineup as well. So obviously, I would go for 3 left-arm spinners. Any Bangladesh batting lineup in their first 30 years of one-day cricket.
Yeah, I think it's a travesty if you don't go for it. Now, Isa's patiently been listening. He got a nice history lesson from the two of you. And I'm sure a lot of young viewers of Bangladesh cricket listening in who might be carried away with just the last 5-6 years of Bangladesh cricket it would be right to remember what Mohammed Rafiq's role and contribution was. So let's see if Isa is now tempted to include Mohammed Rafiq. He was outvoted. He actually went for Syed Russell as the preferred option over Mohammed Rafiq. If I remember, Mohammed Rafiq's bowled a couple of balls quicker than Syed Russell. I could be wrong. But yeah, so let's see if Isa is convinced with what Zulkar and Isam have said and whether he finds room for Mohammed Rafiq in his team because Abdul Razak's there anyway. Isa.
I'm going to speak on 3 things. So firstly, Mohammed Rafiq. So when it came to my 11, I put down Mohammed Rafiq in my 11 and Abdul Razak in my honorable mentions. Because I was not going to go with 3 left-arm spinners. I've seen people like Isam Bhai rip into the Bangladesh team because they were playing too many spinners versus West Indies in test matches recently, But so I wanted to go with 2 left-arm spinners. And then my second left-arm spinner was firstly Rafiq. But the more I thought about white ball cricket, the more I thought about ODIs and T20s, it just became apparent to me with the stats that somehow if I put that emotional part of Bangladeshi weight bearers during certain times, Razak probably had a bigger impact on the international stage. I remember that when we first became a T20 team, if we could talk about the first 2 bowlers that were capable of containing international batsmen, it would be Shakib and it would be like Abdul Razak. So if I'm talking white ball and T20, I think like Rafiq sadly missed out on it because of the era, but Abdul Razak definitely has like some form of influence in that era of Bangladesh cricket. With Syed Russell, I find it a very, very interesting or one of those like enigma bowlers as to how his economy rate was so good at that pace. And till this day, I feel like sadly, like he didn't have the build, but he was probably our best swing bowler with the new ball. He came in this era of 2005 to 2010. And right before that, in 2004, we ended our 5-year drought of not winning a one-day match. All of a sudden, Bangladesh team, I felt, figured out that the only way, like realistically, we are going to get from 220 to 250 on our best day. What we have to do is stifle the run chase. And one of the things that was not working for Bangladesh at that time was that people would come down the track to all our bowlers and just like blast them all over the park in the first 15 overs. And I felt like Syed Russell was one of the first bowlers that uh, was able to bowl in tandem with Mashrafi and like keep that economy rate down, something that Nazmul and Tapush Buisho was not able to do. And for me, he was a very important transitional player between the Rafiq era and the Shakib Mushfiq era.
Syed Russell, not a name that I had forgotten, but such a sad end. I mean, he was misdiagnosed with an ankle problem. It was the doctor's fault, and I think he got a bit of compensation from it, but I don't think, having his career scrapped away was enough compensation. So he's now a bowling coach. He plays a bit of amateur cricket, but it was a huge loss for Bangladesh cricket. I think very innocuous looking bowler, but in crucial situations in the 2007 World Cup, 2007 World T20 in South Africa, important. He made a lot of important contributions, and he's, one of those bowlers. I mean, you don't have a lot of express fast bowlers from Bangladesh often, but then you have to work with what you have. And I think he was one of those limited talent guys who got the best out of his abilities. And I won't pick him in this team because I already have Mustafiz, and I think, as I said, it's a dream team. So I think 3 spinners is what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you think now that you have Mustafizur Rahman, you think that he does what Syed Russell does better than Syed Russell, with no disrespect. So Mohammed Rafiq is in that team. As I look back at how many slots are filled now, let's remind everyone, Tamim Iqbal's there, Litin Das to partner him, Shakib Mushfiq or Mahmudullah all pick themselves, so too does Mashrafi Murtaza. Mohammed Rafiq and Abdul Razak will complete what would be a 3-man spin attack, and Mustafizur Rahman along with Mashrafi makes already for 5 specialist bowlers with the off spin if needed of Mahmudullah. There are therefore just 2 spots vacant, and this is where we do not have any uniformity from our 3 panelists. And you'd think one of those spots would be arguably for someone who'd bat at 4, given I think Mushfiqur 5, Mahmudullah 6 seems to be what everyone believes is best for this side. And therefore number 7 also opens up as potentially a slot for an extra hard-hitting batsman, possibly another bowler who can bat. Or it's all up for grabs now. And the name that is going to trigger some serious debate now is of the former captain himself, Mohammad Ashraful, who was picked by both Zulkar and Isa. Isam has gone for Aftab Ahmed. And then we will come to that number 7 slot where there are a few contenders from Nasir Hussain to Shabir Rahman, or even if you want to squeeze in an extra fast bowler, who knows, maybe Rubal Hussain will find a way into this team. I'm a big Rubal Hussain fan. But let's go to that number 4 spot. It's a very important position in a white ball team. And who is the batsman that best commands it? Isam.
I think on a purely cricketing basis, I think Aftab Ahmed would fit into this team. And I think Aftab Ahmed's talent and Aftab Ahmed's ability to bat the way he did would fit into this current Bangladesh team as well. I mean, that comes in as something of a surprise to a lot of people. But I think if we can remember, he was the finisher. He was when there was a 15 over restriction, he was the first guy, I think, who really took on the bowlers, and he had the shots all around the wicket. Very lazy cricketer, but a very, very good fielder as well. Ashraful did cross my mind, but Aftab Ahmed in this era, or having now we have Tamim and Liton batting, then you have Shakib. I think Aftab Ahmed is the right dose of big hitting that we need for a 350 score.
All right. So many reasons for Aftab Ahmed, and not one of them was that magnificent 5-wicket haul against New Zealand. You think this is a guy who needs to be in your team? If we can get rid of Brendan McCullum and Craig McMillan and Nathan Astle, why not? But Aftab Ahmed, now does he make a case to oust Mohammad Ashraful? Because both Zulkar and Isa went for him. Isa, you happy with Ashraful in that side, or are you tempted to switch him for Aftab after listening to Isa?
But Ashraful, for me, was the first white ball match winner of the Bangladesh cricket team. And there was a specific era when Ashraful went out, the entire country thought like, okay, the match is over. We turn our TV off. It was like, if anyone could hold their own against an international attack, it was Ashraful. So the stats don't speak for themselves. The records don't speak for themselves either. But definitely my most emotional choice of the day has to be Mohammad Ashraful, just because of like the time and the era and like the impact he had during that time.
I think so. I think for me, Aftab would be a nice pick as a player in the bottom of the actually like order as an accelerator. That role that either him or Sabbir or Nasir has been able to play at certain points during Bangladesh's cricket's sort of evolution. I think for me, Aftab is still the one that holds the strongest memories of that piece, and I feel like as he mentioned, like if he could have played in this era and was able to apply actually himself a bit better at his peak, I think he was better than both Sabbir and Nasir for me personally. We once had the real privilege of interviewing Wasim Akram when he pointed out that his batting average was higher than Ashraful's as well. So I think you have these two sides of Ashraful, right? Like one is like, hey, everyone here believes that he can really deliver the wins for Bangladesh, and then you have actual cricketers who believe that his average is probably lower than actually a person recognized as a batsman or pure play batsman, right? So I think between those two, Ashraful's truth lies in between those two extremes, is what my actual belief is. I think he was a really talented player who just definitely did not have, the kind of coaching, mental fortitude, or ability or guidance that was necessary to be an elite top level talent, right? And I think I feel personally that's us failing him a bit more than him failing himself, right? Because as an institution, Bangladesh cricket, etc., could have done a lot better job of harnessing his talent. And in terms of innings, I think everyone always talks about, that really game against Australia or the game against South Africa. For me, there's still the biggest personal highlight for Ashraful is that, 50 odd ball, 90 he scored against England, and I actually remember like, he was almost out in the first ball. I think the ball hit his stumps and the bails didn't fall off. So it was this really lucky kind of thing. But then later, he was just, hitting these big guys, Steve Harmison bowling at 145, 146, and he was hitting them, plucking them off his hips and hitting them over mid wicket for six. And no Bangladeshi I had seen until then was able to do that. And so for me, that's just like real emotional appeal. And I feel like for me, that's why he makes the team ahead of a few other probably slightly more deserving like call-ups. And in an all-time team, and if we're actually talking about players at their absolute peak, I think his peak was definitely higher than a lot of others. So yeah,
Right.
for me, that's why I picked him.
2-1, Mohammad Ashraful gets in. Mohammad Isam has registered his, I wouldn't say his dissent, but certainly his concern on not having Aftab Ahmed. However, like Zulkar points out, only in Zulkar's team can you actually squeeze in both Mohammad Ashraful and Aftab Ahmed. So you now give Ashraful that number 4 spot if Shakib is batting 3. So that's pretty formidable top 4. And then Zulkar did put in a toss-up between Sabir, Nasir Hussain, and Aftab. Now, if Aftab gets the nod, then you have both those in the team. Isam also went with Nasir Hussain in his team. Is he willing to do away with Nasir Hussain and bring in Aftab? Isam, that's a call that you take now because Isa's on a different planet on this. He wants an extra fast bowler. So I'm going to go to Isam. You need to tell me now between Aftab and Nasir Hussain who your vote goes for that final batting slot or that number 7 slot.
So yeah, I think it should be Nasir in that case, because if we have Ashraful at 4, we have 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, we have Mushfiq and Mahmudullah. Then you will have to take Nasir as the last recognized batsman and who also bowls a bit of off spin. Again, Nasir at his peak was slightly better than Aftab Ahmed at his peak in terms of numbers. He's got a Test 100. He's won Bangladesh some crucial matches in the Asia Cup in 2012. As long as he was, and it was a short peak, 3 years, I think. But I think he showed that there was life outside the big 5 in Bangladesh cricket at that time.
All right. Now, Isa, would you like to make a case to try and convince your more experienced brethren on this panel to leave out a batsman and play Rubel Hussain? Of course, it had his impact in ODI cricket for Bangladesh. Or are you tempted to now go the other way and say, all right, let's pick Nasir Hussain or Aftab Ahmed?
See, I'm a musician, so for me, brand is very important. And as a brand, I feel like a certain brand of cricket that is of international standard or a certain kind of mentality, an attacking approach is something post 2015 Bangladesh is seen to possess. Like that entire chirping increased at that time and everything as well. When there's an extra fast bowler, it seems like you can take more wickets, you can dominate the other team better. And in this team, because I've brought in Syed Russell, who needs to put the economy in check, I can bring in one more strike bowler. And that strike bowler for Mashrafi has always been Rubel. For Bangladesh, also over the last decade, has also been Rubel. So I feel like if in case Fizz is having a bad day, and if our other bowlers are keeping a check, Rubel usually comes up as a very crucial partnership breaker for Bangladesh.
2015, you'd think it was a cornerstone moment, wasn't it? A watershed moment for Bangladesh cricket to make a knockout game of the World Cup. And you go to Adelaide, the game against England, and it was Rubel Hussain that made it possible. He also, as I did look up, still holds the joint best record for the best bowling figures for Bangladesh. So he's a man who can pick up wickets in heat. We know he's quick. We know he's got that slingy action that batsmen find hard. So Zulkar, it looks like you will have to, since Isam said Nasser Hussain's the option he wants at 7, are you going to go the bold way and say, all right, let me reconsider that open slot and give it to Rubel Hussain and give it to Isa? Or are you saying now this team has enough bowling, Nasser Hussain's the safe bet?
I mean, Isa makes a good point, and I mean, in general, if this was Test cricket, I would say that we would definitely I try to get one extra bowler in probably. But I think given what I mentioned at the start, which is that I generally feel that Bangladesh historically have performed well when they've had a slightly longer batting lineup and a bevy of bowling options. I feel like if I were to set this team up for the greatest amount of success, I would try to give that slot to a batsman rather than a bowler. And so I would tend more to, either pick Aftab or Nasir in that slot. And if it's I'm actually fine with either of them. Ultimately, I think if we are going to build a Bangladesh team of the last, 2.5 decades, we actually have to build it in the image of what Bangladesh teams have looked like. Spinner heavy, couple of fast bowlers, a couple of off spinners who can also do the job, and so unfortunately, like Isa, I apologize in advance, but I'll probably give that slot to actually a Nasir or an Aftab.
You have to apologize to Rubel,
It does look like, and Zulkar, you're happy with Nasir Hussain over Aftab for the reasons he said.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with
brilliant.
that.
All right. In which case, the only small point we need to pick is who our 12th man becomes. Now, the 12th man doesn't necessarily need to be your best fielder. The 12th man could also be the man who came closest to making this 11. So, looking at the names that we have discussed, would that be Aftab Ahmed? Would that be Syed Russell in an emotional decision? Would it be Sabir Rahman? Would it be Shahriar Nafees, who we go back to? Or would it just be Rubel? So, who's our 12th man? Who came closest to making this team but missed out?
Among all the players that we talked about, I think Rubel comes closest because of his, record and the fact that with white ball he's really good towards the depth.
I think definitely Rubel is probably also my player who, in my team, who was closest to making the 11 and didn't make it. I know we've talked a lot about other options, but I think all things said and done, Rubel is probably the guy whose peak was closest to be able to crack this team of, peak era Bangladesh players. So definitely happy with him as the choice of the 12th man.
All right. And with that, we have achieved what we thought was going to be a smoother road. And I think it's a pretty smooth road. I think this has been the best education on Bangladesh's white ball cricket that any young fan can ask for. And as I look back at the team that we have picked, that Mohammad Isam, that Zulkarnain Islam and Isa Farooq have picked, we do have Tamim Iqbal, who with Tamim, where it's Litin Das. So honorable mention to Shahriar Nafees, Shakib, Mohammad Ashraful, Mushfiqur Ray, Mahmudullah to follow. Honorable mentions at that time to Aftab Ahmed and Mehrab Hussain. You've got Nasir Hussain at 7. Mashrafi Mortaza, you think is unanimous choice as captain. Mohammed Rafiq and Abdul Razak to round up the spin bowling options. And Mustafizur Rahman. Rubel Hussain came close. He makes it as 12th man. That is Bangladesh's best white ball team in our eye. Are we happy with that, gentlemen? A bit of give and take. Isam had to get in Mohammad Ashraful in his team, right? Isa's happy to bring in Mohammad Rafiq, even though he thought long and hard about a player before his All right. So big thank you to our entire panel, Isam, Zulkar, and Isa. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Put in your team in the comment section. I'm sure there's never any agreement on the dream teams, but we've tried our very best to give you Bangladesh's greatest white ball dream team. Thanks for watching.